Hi everyone, just before the video starts, I would like to preface that I planned and scripted this video early January. Unfortunately, I happened to have exams and both exams were worth 70% of my qualification grade and I had to put this video on hold for obvious reasons. Therefore, I understand that this topic is already relatively dead and as far as I'm aware, the trend has died down a lot, but I still do want to make this post because I want to post videos because I care about the subject rather than the topic being popular, and I hope that you can still find this discussion valuable. Thank you, and back to the actual video. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. My name's Pufftastic, but you can call me Puff. So today I want to speak about a trend that's been on my radar for a few days now as of writing the script. So basically ever since the start of the year, and that is TikTok's beloved 2020 revival. If you don't know, TikTok is currently being invaded by sparkly anime icons, typing quirks, and fairy emojis again. And why, may you ask? Because as of current time, it's almost the 5-year anniversary since the pandemic, when everyone spent all day living stress-free, drinking whipped coffee, and making Charli D'Amelio edits. Or at least that's what TikTok seems to suggest. I want to talk about this trend because I have super mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, the trend is mostly being carried by young teenagers who are like 13 to 14 currently, and for the most part they're just having fun divulging in content they were too young really to experience back in 2020, and that part is cool. But on the other hand, there's a lot of romanticisation going on. So let's talk about that. So, a little bit of background information about me, which is a big part as to why I feel so iffy about this trend. I was 13 when lockdown came into force. I turned 13 late 2019, so I'd only really been a teenager a few months when everything began. For my fellow British viewers, I was in year 8, and for my American viewers, that's 7th grade. Being 13 during a huge health crisis was definitely a blessing and a curse. I wasn't old enough that I had to worry about it affecting my education too severely or impacting my career prospects, but I was away from my friends for that long that it was enough to push me into therapy. I'm also old enough to remember what that year was like in detail, unfortunately, without too much nostalgia clouding me, because I wouldn't really class the pandemic as a childhood experience. However, you might disagree. Like I said earlier in the video, this trend is mostly being carried by current day 13-year-olds, kids who were the same age as me when the pandemic hit. These guys would have been around 8 to 9 at the time and therefore relatively unaware of the state of the world beyond knowing that school was cancelled and that they couldn't see their friends. This has led to some very tone-deaf takes, such as wishing for another pandemic. TikTok has always been relatively tone deaf when it comes to serious situations, but this is the worst I've seen in a while. Not only is it just weird to wish for a health crisis to pop up so you can have a little bit of time off school, but it's also just insensitive to the victims of COVID. Many people lost their lives, livelihoods, and people also suffered mentally as a result of being stuck indoors for so long. In general, if you look back and think really hard, 2020 was an absolutely shitty time for most people. If you weren't suffering with your physical health due to the fact that you were restricted as to where you could go, or the fact that you caught COVID and you were suffering from long COVID or something of the sorts like that, you were also struggling with your mental health, money, relationships, education, even more than that. There was also lots of rioting and hoarding, if you've forgotten. One of the only positive things in people's lives was the internet. It was a great escape and the only escape for a lot of people, and that gave them something to do while riding out the storm. This, I think, has led to a lot of trends people look back on fondly, and trends that today's young teens and tweens look back at with jealousy, generally forgetting all the bad aspects and terrible things we went through during that time. This phenomenon is known as Rosy retrospection, which is a cognitive bias in which we recall past events more positively than they were when we actually experienced them. This is a way our brain protects itself from mental scarring, but it can also lead to people downplaying the severity of a situation or past event. But Puff, if your point is that the children of today are leading this trend and that they didn't even experience the culture back then, why is this relevant? It's relevant because there are still many young adults participating in this trend and pushing it. They're the ones mostly making the content and sharing their positive experiences from lockdown, which is causing teenagers to push the content further and complain that they were unfortunate enough not to experience it. I've spoken about children manifesting a second deadly virus to shut down the globe for another year, but what other takes have I seen that have actually pushed me to bother to make a video about it? Well, one of my personal favourites definitely has to be that back in 2020, the internet was a nicer place. Trust me, when I first started seeing this, I thought I was tripping, because at least in my experience, people online during that time were the nastiest they've ever been, and I've been on the internet about 10 years now. Those of you who were part of certain circles of the internet during the pandemic, such as the anime community, cosplay community, alternative circles, or you were just on Discord, you would probably understand. I saw a video on my For You page asking people's worst 2020 Discord experiences, and I'm just going to read out some of the comments, so if you weren't there, you can get a feel as to what it was like to be online during that time. Ahem! I don't know how to fake an ahem. How'd you do that? Got my moderation permissions taken away because I banned someone for sending gore. I got doxxed for typing in capital letters because it triggered someone's Nagito Kaimeda little alter. Someone drawing NSFW fan art of me and my mom. It turns out it was a literal cult and had to be shut down because of an investigation. I got ganged up on because I sent a picture of Lord Farquaad and Shrek kissing. And those examples are mostly the tamer comments out of the bunch. When I look back at 2020 personally and I think about my own experiences, yeah, that checks out. People were definitely more comfortable being themselves and expressing their fashion and interests, and that is great, but unfortunately they didn't limit themselves to that, and it resulted in honestly quite a lot of traumatic experiences, and I would personally have to disagree with the statement that people were nicer back then for that reason. Now, I wanted to kind of gather other people's opinions on this trend, since obviously mine on its own is not only biased, but also doesn't really allow room for discussion. So here's what my Instagram followers had to say. Seeing the glitter anime profile pictures brought back repressed trauma. Nothing much to comment on this other than valid. I think it's funny, although people with the YBC Yarchin Bitch Club profile pictures can stay away. Yeah, I think Yarchin Bitch Club was one of the weirdest pieces of popular media from back then and led to some questionable art and ships that, you know, I'm not here to divulge into. If you want to research it, look into that yourself, but please, unless you're over 18, please don't. Let the past go, bro. This is something I partially agree with. I think 2025 should be its own thing totally, but I do also understand and appreciate that people want to celebrate and interact with the media that help them through hard times. This next one is a little bit longer. Though it's fun to see the revival of certain trends, a lot of the people who say that they're going to join in were probably people who made fun of everyone back in 2020. The only reason why they say that now is because being weird is in now and people want to be different. I can also see this being the case for some people. We do have to acknowledge that the 2020 style, or things associated with the internet during the pandemic, such as anime's rise in popularity and e-girl fashion, are not underground unknown things anymore. And really, they never really have been. I'd argue it's almost mainstream, if not mainstream in some aspects. I think a lot of people are taking part in the trend because it's a trend and not because they really want to consume the content, regardless of if it was trending and other people were doing it or not. This is very evident by the fact that this content has almost completely stopped showing up on my feed, and it literally hasn't even been 3 weeks. I love it, and I know people say the style is cringe, but everyone felt more confident. I can understand and I can respect this opinion. Being kept away from society allowed people to feel more comfortable, not conforming to norms, and I do miss seeing old kids and cosplayers wandering down the street. There's a few times I went out in 2020 because, spoiler, I did go out maybe about 4 times in the year, and I think twice out of those 4 times that I went somewhere like a shopping centre, there were cosplayers wandering around the place. It's really sweet how people are accepting cringe and we're moving away from cringe culture. I think this is also cool, but I'm a very cynical person, and personally I think that people are motivated much more by the fact that the collective are participating in the trend rather than out of an individual interest and acceptance of cringe culture. I would say that cringe culture never really died. People, still make fun of things that they find cringe. I don't think that's going to go away. And finally, our last opinion on the trend. I feel like 2020 was a year. We posted a lot of stuff because the majority of us thought we were all going to pass away. The trend has some upsides because now we can be cringe freely. I don't think, personally, that the majority of people thought we'd all unalive. I don't know what can you say on YouTube without getting censored? I don't know. I think that this was more of a concern that people who were older and had health issues had, but there was definitely an air of uncertainty surrounding just general health and if we were going to suffer in the long term. There seems to be a shared feeling that during the pandemic, people felt more free to be themselves and express themselves. And although I think that some of this feeling is due to the rose-tinted glasses we have on when we look back at the pandemic, it does hold some truth to it. We weren't held down by the societal expectations we normally feel we have to abide by, such as presenting a certain way in school or work. Being away from general society allowed a lot of people time to reflect on themselves and discover who they are, especially teenagers, which is another reason why I think people look back at that time in their lives so fondly. Especially that in current time, they probably have a lot more responsibility on their shoulders compared to back then. I certainly do. What I really want people to take away from this video is that although it is cool to look back and think of that time in our lives fondly, as well as rediscover our old interests from back then, or if you're a current day 13 to 14 year old or, even younger, discover what teenagers back then liked and interact with that content. It's also important to be mindful about what we say. At the end of the day, it will always be a sensitive topic, and it was never okay and never will be okay to say things such as, I hope there's a new pandemic, and to a degree, I really wish I was a teen back then. It is ignorant, and I do recognise a minority of people are saying this, but people really did suffer back then, and it was a real and serious situation which shouldn't be manifested or romanticised. If you're a teenager now, enjoy being a teenager now. Enjoy the freedom of movement a lot of us didn't have, as well as not having to worry about your vulnerable loved ones. I missed out on so many experiences I should have had at 13 to 14, and it delayed even until I was 15 because things didn't really go back to normal until then. So I missed out on a lot of my early teen experiences, and I'll never get that time back. Thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope that you took something away from it. It's not a black and white situation, but I do think it's important that we think over what we say before echoing it online. And regardless of your stance on the situation, I hope you can see where I'm coming from. Feel free to discuss below, however rude and angry comments will just be deleted, so don't even bother. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Oh, and also drop me content suggestions below because I'm kind of running out of ideas. Okay, bye.